Good evening. I think this, one of these weeks, we are going to begin to study all of June, From the Zen Kitchen to Enlightenment, which is Dogen's text on the Tenzo Kyokan, which is the way of the cook, instructions to the cook. So I thought I would introduce that a bit. You're going to be, on Tuesday nights, you're going to be discussing it in much more detail, which it definitely deserves. It's a wonderful text. It's endlessly wonderful. And he explores the qualities of mind that we bring to the work of cooking. And how our Buddha nature functions in actual daily experience. Daily experience with work and with relationships. What are our relationships with the things that we use and the people that we share, people and animals and everything we share this life with that makes up our life. And this teaching is part of a much more complete text about how to carry out the work of a monastery, living in a monastery, all the different training positions, how to behave. It's very, very specific, very detailed. So this we're looking at from the standpoint of the monastery of our life. All of the teachings, come to us from other cultures and other settings, but they're all completely applicable to what we encounter every day. This practice that we do is a refining practice. We're refining our lives. We're removing impurities. We're discovering what gets in the way of doing that and what gets us all screwed up. This is what gets clearer and clearer as we go along. We become aware of what gets in the way of seeing clearly and acting skillfully. What we call skillful action is always what accords with the true situation, with our current conditions. The other night during sharing, we considered the question of what is it that we get from this practice? Why is this, those of us who get hooked, why? What is the effect of practice? And it's subtle, it's minute, it's very a refinement of our sensibility and our sensitivity to everything that goes on in our life. So it really, we call that opening the Dharma eye, where we see much more minutely into everything that makes up our life. And refining our life comes with so many changes, small changes that we make as we realize our mistaken ideas about things. We can have ideas about, and then we discover that actually that was just a belief that I had, and actually if I take a good look, there's nothing to it. It's just a habitual thought pattern. So we become much more intimate and come into more fruitful relationship with everything that composes our life. And as we do that, we become more skillful. Clearly, naturally, that would happen. So, and my experience is that life just has gotten simpler because of that. When there's not a lot of confusion and static to penetrate every time you turn around, things are just clearer, they're simple. And so when we practice with our primary tools, we use them more skillfully and with less effort, but more appropriate effort. Our primary tools, of course, are our awareness, our thoughts, our speech, and our actions. That's what we've got. That's what we've got to work with. So I'd like to talk a bit about the text that we'll be taking up in much more depth on Tuesday nights in the Dharma discussion, and encourage everybody vigorously to read it. Now, that doesn't always happen when we're studying a text, but I really, this is such a wonderful text, and I really encourage everybody to get hold of a copy and read it, and study it. So the cook in a Zen setting is called the Tenzo. In our Sangha, it's actually a shared training role that's been taken up by Gene and by Ellen for the next year. They'll be sharing that role, primarily Ellen. The Tenzo is always given, that training position is part of an experienced practitioner's life. It's part of the path. It's always given to a senior practitioner, and who have skills in the kitchen, whatever they are, and but are clearly committed to a life of understanding the Dharma teachings and employing them in the role of head cook. And the role of head cook is about a lot more than just cooking, but I don't want to just emphasize just cooking, because cooking, we all depend on it for our delight and our sustenance and our encouragement. A cook knows how to use all the ingredients, nothing wasted, whether the ingredients are very plain or they're very fancy. And in the text, he talks a lot about that, about how to use any ingredient. All the things that come our way are what we use in order to live effectively and with skill. So all of Dogen's teachings in this work are given through images about the kitchen. It's kitchen lore. For instance, one of my favorite lines, and there are a number of favorite lines that I have, and you may find yourself coming to some for yourself, is, put what belongs on a high shelf on a high shelf, and what belongs on a low shelf on a low shelf. And this is applicable in so many ways. For instance, I'm working on patience. This is my perennial practice, is patience, because I tend to be very impatient. Improving my ability to be patient no matter what. So I'm putting this on a high shelf for me. One that is easy to reach, and with nothing that makes in the way that makes it hard to get to. So how I arrange my schedule, my expectations, getting enough sleep, enough exercise, and making sure I have ample Sabbath time and Zazen, make up this high shelf, putting this on the high shelf. It enables me to meet the unexpected with patience. To be able to turn on a dime, that's a phrase we use a lot. In Zen, we learn how to turn on a dime. To be very flexible. And sometimes, what gets in the way of that is our agendas. And, often what I notice when I sit down, if I've had a very busy day, is I'm going at about 80 miles an hour. And then if I'm going that fast, it's hard to be patient. So slowing it down, always being ready just to slow it down. So if I overload my day or aren't aware of the expectations that I'm loading on, I can be really impatient. And I'm less likely to remember to practice. I've put what belongs on a high shelf on a low shelf. So that's one of the ways that I apply this teaching. Patience requires me to be steady, to stay open and aware and not too terribly caught up or blinded by my own agendas. So how aware are you during the day of your own agendas? What has to get done? What has to get done without a lot of stress or guilt if you don't get it done. Because some days, if you're like me, you get a lot done. Some days you don't get anything done. So, putting what belongs on a high shelf and what belongs on a low shelf on a low shelf. And when we do this, we are able to practice with the three minds. And Dogen goes into the three minds of practice. He talks about the three qualities of mind. And we say there are three, but actually they're all just one mind. They're all intermingled. As in anything that we list and number, it's just different aspects to help us focus on a particular aspect of something. So the three qualities of mind that develop through a sustained life of practice are joyful mind, parental mind, and magnanimous mind. And you can see they're not actually separate. They're different aspects. And they are all part of our innate capability, our innate capacity as Buddha. Our Buddha nature allows us to tap and to live into and from these energies. And they're how our Buddha nature shows up in activity, in everyday experience. So first, let's look at joyful mind. You already know it, I hope. This is a quality that comes with a sense of integrity when you're paying attention and you're not going in a number of different directions at once, but completely present to what's at hand, and you're living truthfully with kindness and generosity. If all of those are in place, you tend to feel fairly joyful. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Is that your experience? Yeah. You live with a joyful heart. We appreciate, with a joyful mind, we appreciate our circumstances of being born into conditions that have allowed us to hear and practice this wonderful Dharma, this wonderful way of approaching our life. So we can use it to benefit not only ourselves, but hopefully we spread the joy. So I flash back to a number of things. The first thing that always comes to my mind when I think of joyful mind is Genki Roshi, Takabayashi Genki. There's a picture of him up on the founder's altar. And one winter sesshin, it was Rohatsu sesshin in the dead of winter. This was outside of Seattle. It was icy cold and snowy. And it was the dead of night, because the last night of sesshin, of Rohatsu, we stayed up all night meditating. So every night we would stay up a little bit later. And so finally the seventh night was an all-nighter. And we were in a camp that had no heat. So we were cold. We were cold to the bone. And but there was a kitchen and a dining building, which was nice and steamy and warm. So Genki got up in the middle of the sit at about 11 o'clock and disappeared. And then he came in and he did the clackers. And he said, he invited us to come into the kitchen building for a snack to help us get through the night. And he served us these bowls of steaming rice gruel. And when we came in, he said, gruel, and we all thought, oh no. And floating in the top of this bowl of steaming white gruel was a slice of carrot with a little nick out of it. And he said with tremendous joy, I mean, he was shining. He said, full moon over snow. And we had just tromped through the snow to get there, right? And it was steaming hot and incredibly delicious, which everything he cooked was delicious. And he cooked a lot of very simple food, but it was terrific. He's a real master. So when the session was over and we were sharing, he said how much joy he always has cooking for the Sangha. And it was clear. We could taste it. You know, we could taste that joy. So this kind of joy is felt. I mean, the quality of joy is comes up not only when everything is going our way, but it can be especially evident when things are not going our way. In a state, and we find ourselves, no matter whether that's happening or not, in kind of a state of grace, or even loss. When there's a death that is peaceful and timely, and everything has been addressed, and there's love, then you might notice joy arising in the midst of the distress. There can be great sadness and great joy at the same time. That certainly was my experience when my mother died. Incredible joy and incredible sadness. So it can jolt you. Something like this can really jolt you into the wider universe that isn't affected by dire conditions. We can really awaken at a time like that. There's a story about the great Theravada master Gunaratana, who at the end of the era of the killing fields in Burma, where all of the many Buddhist priests were murdered along with half the population. It was a horrendous nightmare of a time. But he had sought refuge in a neighboring country, and he came back in his robes and he walked the full length of the country, greeting people and reminding them of the Dharma. And Burma was a primarily Buddhist country. I mean, the Rohingya are also there, the Muslims, but it was an occasion for tremendous joy in the population after profound suffering, and the reminder of the potential that practice gives all of us to be able to not lose our connection with the joy as well as all the difficulties. And then another thing was yesterday talking with a young woman who has a very severe debilitating illness that is just going to get worse. And yet she is shining. And she is a practitioner and said, this is the condition that I work with. And the most wonderful thing is to keep in touch with my joy. To continue every day to contribute in the ways that I can contribute to other people's well-being. And I was very, very moved by that. It takes a lot of courage. And this practice takes a lot of courage. It does. To sit and be silent with ourselves and to experience our full range of the internal territory can take a lot of courage. So joyful mind. And please notice when you are in the grip of joyful mind. It's hard to avoid, of course. But then there's parental mind. Parental mind, where all beings are our children. And I felt very sad years ago when there was something on the ballot that was about contributing more to the school system, the school district for children's programs. I forget the exact. And I talked to an older person who said, well, you know, my kids are grown, that doesn't even concern me. And I thought, oh, that's very sad. That's very sad. And it's very joyful to recognize how every child is our child. You know, every being is our child. I noticed the worms in the path today. You know, that it's drying out, and some worms got caught in the middle, and they're covered with gravel, and they're wriggling in pain, you know. And I thought, oh, parental mind, and I picked up a lot of worms on my walk. Put them in the grass. I don't know if it helps, but parental mind. Living into our life with a tender heart toward all of life is really parental mind. Our body, our relationships, our tasks, our thoughts, our speech, whatever we offer, to let it come from and be influenced by a tender heart, including some of the difficult things that are going on in our public life. How do we bring our tender heart into that? It takes strong practice. And maybe it's just remembering that there is a tender heart somewhere that could be brought. No ingredient in the meal of our life is too plain or too fancy to be appreciated, to merit our care. Dogen's language for this is affectionate and caring concern. That's the spirit of the parent, affectionate and caring concern, even when our kids are being a real pain in the butt. We still have affection, even when we hate them. We hate our own helplessness. That's what we hate. So this brings to mind the practice of metta, loving kindness. One of the roots of the word metta, one of the Sanskrit roots, means friend. And parental mind is a friendly mind. One of the things that really marks Zen centers is they tend to be pretty friendly, hopefully, because we're all practicing, especially here. Maybe elsewhere too. That'd be good. So parents are constant in their affection, constant in their concern and commitment. And how at ease we can be when we regard each encounter with this quality of mind. Another thing about a parent is they are responsible. They have a sense of being responsible and seeing things more completely than the child does. We take responsibility for seeing clearly, guiding and educating. Parental mind is free of self-clinging. And one of the sources of great pain and difficulty for parents is the self-clinging. It gets in the way. We have ideas about what we want our kids to be or how we want things to go, and they don't. So that's one reason why Pa-Zen and Ma-Zen is a really strong practice, because it confronts us with all of the forms that our self-clinging takes. Parents aren't there for personal gain, but just for the fulfillment that comes with nurturing life and giving whatever you can to bring forth a caring and responsible adult when your kids grow up, no matter what else they do. So that's what we aim for, and that's kind of the quality of parental mind. And then the third is magnanimous mind. Mind like a mountain, says Dogan. Mind like a mountain. Joanna Macy, I don't know, are you familiar with the work of Joanna Macy? She wrote a book a long time ago called Thinking Like a Mountain about the environmental crisis and how to meet the difficulties that it is bringing to all of us in our life, and how to bring concern in a way that benefits and does not cancel us out because we're so deep in despair. So she did a lot of workshops on working with despair for activists. And she really demonstrates magnanimous mind, and there are many who do in this world. Magnanimous mind is bodhisattva mind, really. It's generous, it's large, it's stable, and impartial. We're bringing concern to everything that we meet to bring benefit. We could say that Sangha Zen Center is an effort to bring magnanimous mind into the community. This is our opportunity to practice this mind to the extent that we fully embody practice here and together and support each other. Sangha has no other function but to practice magnanimous mind, parental mind, and joyful mind, to discover its roots and to clear away the things that get in the way of living accordingly. So the practice requires constant care and uses all the ingredients that we can muster, all our devoted attention and willingness to develop a profound tolerance for the many mind states that throw us for a loop. For the many, everybody who comes here, we will encounter over the years difficulties, and we want these qualities to be well practiced to meet the difficulties. We bring everything here. We bring our quirks, our tears, our insecurities, our inflated egos, our agendas, our opinions, our ingenuity, and our laughter. We show up with them and feel them and work with them. So in the Dharma, wisdom is always cooking and opening our eyes to what is most vital in our life and enabling us to have contact with Buddha. Maintain vital contact with our Buddha, which is the reality of our life in this delicious and mysterious meal that we all share. So I hope that this talk encourages you to look into the book and attend the meetings on Tuesday, so you can share everything you have to share about these minds and this practice of cooking our lives. Thank you.
Please turn to page 5.